Okay, thank you, Brian. For those of you who didn't hear, what do you think is the impact of a lay-led synod like we are at? Will it have a lasting impact?
This? In there, yeah. Okay. I don't know who asked that question. I will be thankful for the rest of my life. I had a friend whom I valued deeply over the years who made it very clear to me that I think she called them clown shows like this one. She meant conferences, there's no doubt about it. And she saw absolutely no value in this and was worried as a friend about me and the effort it was taking, the money, the time, the effort to gather people together like ourselves. I had to give that question, in other words, a great deal of personal attention. And I think I answered it indirectly yesterday. You weren't conscious of it, and I wasn't conscious of it either at that time. But I told you yesterday that discipleship is an element of change, and that we have had all of our lives, the word disciple has been translated for us as quiet and obedient. Neither of those words have anything to do with the way Jesus and the apostles are presented to us in the scriptures. In other words, they went out and they made trouble in every group they found, every conference they ran, every piece of food they did not have to eat. They fussed and carried and pushed and went back again the next day too. You're here as disciples. I saw it in your faces yesterday. It almost worried me because I said, I've wasted a great deal of time with these people. They know exactly what I'm talking about. They do not need to hear it again. But the fact of the matter is, we all do. We all do. And when Mary talked to you about baptism and when you go to the fount and who is making the promises and who is doing the work, that's an act of discipleship in the church. It is the coming together of all of us to hold one another up. Now, kids, I've been at this for 57 years. I'm tired. But I came because you were coming. And it is that drawing together. It's a whole awareness that we are the church. We insist on being the church. We will come together as the church, and the church may not ruin us. We're it. So go home tired and be happy that you came, because sitting next to you is somebody just as dumb as you are. They spent this money, make this journey, said to themselves, somehow or other, I think I've heard all of this before. Right. And that proof is that it's in your heart and it's in your soul. Therefore, it is in the church, and as a disciple, you must continue to stir the church to life. That's mine.
You want to take that, Mary?
I'll just add about the value of events like this. The nearest event that I can think of in recent times was Root and Branch from Bristol in 2021. And I guess many of us were asking then, as the whole synodality show started to gather momentum, what would we add to it as a lay synod? And I can safely say that at that time in 2021, huge efforts were being made to restrict, if not stop, the German synod. Huge efforts by Pope Francis, by Cardinal Bolette, by the Curia. They were being told that their synod, which they had initiated in good faith, based on things that Pope Francis had encouraged, they were told that their synod was illicit. And they were discouraged. If you remember, the Pope wrote to them and told them he would prefer if they did not talk about things like, for example, women's ordination, the inclusion of women, LGBTI blessings for gay marriages, for LGBTI inclusion. He wanted them to talk about evangelization. And they wrote back and said to him, you talk about evangelization, that's fine. We'll talk about what we want to talk about. There was such disrespect for their freedom of thought and opinion and conscience. The same thing when we were starting down the road of our lay synod, nobody wrote those letters to us because they thought we weren't worthwhile. We were outside of any known system, which was great because then we could operate in freedom. And one of the things that we said very emphatically to all those who would take part in the Synod of Bishops' journey of synodality, which has come to some kind of a pit stop here in Rome this month, we said to them, do not listen when you are told you can't talk about X. If you want to talk about it, make sure that in your synodal groups at diocesan level and at national level that you are free to talk about it. Insist on your freedom. Insist on your freedom of opinion, your freedom of expression. And what I can say safely is that thanks to the Germans' courage and thanks to the message that radiated out across the world from Root and Branch in 2021, that is precisely what happened. That's the value of this today. That's the value of what happened in 2021. Believe this is a leaven that grows.
Thank you both. Okay, I have a question from Elisabetta Povoloni at the New York Times to both of you. Do you think the participants of the synod are aware of our Spirit Unbounded meeting? Do you think it will have an impact on the participants of the Synod of the Bishops? I don't know where I'm pointing. But.
Well, that's like asking whether or not if you gathered a regiment of soldiers with nuclear materials in their pockets, would anybody pay any attention? Would the word get around? Of course it will. Of course. This is the beginning of the laying of the tarmac of a new church. And as long as you make it new, it will stay new until it is growing into something else. The philosopher Boethius writes, I think in about in the 3rd or 4th century, every age is a dream that is dying and one that is coming to life. You're not here to stamp yesterday on the church. You're here to make sure that it can go on growing. And it will grow through one thing for some of you and for other things for the rest of us. This is the charge in the soul of the church. This is where the ripples of the understanding of the church happens. And you are its disciples. You are the people who must come out of this place and begin to open ridiculous conversations with your nature, telling them why you came, because they'll tell somebody else and somebody else will tell them. We are a plant. We're growing. This thing, this week, is not a week-long conference. It is a beginning of a growth in yourself that you will pass on whether people get it wholly or not. I told you yesterday, to you as a group, you must go back and begin to stir. Have a Tuesday night conversation. Those of you who would like to hear, won't you come and we'll have hot dogs. Whatever. If this doesn't impact, it's because you didn't. It's that simple.
Well, I took the precaution of sending my speech to some of my people, the people inside the Vatican. So I know at least they have that much. I sent a copy of the text, rather cheekily, to a number of members of the synod that is assembling at the Synod of Bishops, and whom I knew, people whom I trusted, actually, to take care of the words, because there are good people in there. And if there weren't, I'm not even sure I would be here, to be honest, because I might have given up. But I do believe there are good people in there. I believe there are Machiavellian people in there too, who have, who do not necessarily don't share our views, and would probably see us in many ways as subversive or unhelpful. But on the other hand, I am hoping that there will be space in the Synod of Bishops for the kind of openness that we have had here, despite the fact that the doors are closed. And I'm hoping that those voices will be heard. I'm pretty sure that at the press conferences, particularly from today onwards, they will be increasingly those who are answering the questions from the press on behalf of the media, but the people who are answering the questions on behalf of the Synodal Assembly. More and more it will be put to them what was said here over these days. That they will not be ignorant of it. Already the press today has been very generous in its coverage of what was said here. So it will not be ignored. I do not believe it will be ignored, even inside the Synod.
Thank you. I have another question from a journalist online. The username, The Thing, which she has just clarified, and I'm so happy about it. Her name is Sarah Stutte from katholisch.ch, Switzerland. Thank you, Sarah. So her question is, what do you both think about the imposed duty of secrecy of the Synod of Bishops towards the outside world? Isn't this counterproductive at a time when people are demanding answers?
Well, can I just, beg your pardon? Can I just reflect for 1 second on where secrecy brought us to in relation? I mean, it really worked, didn't it? It has been such a bad deal for the church, secrecy, repression, suppression, for whatever reasons. We only have to look at one of the reasons why we have the crisis in the church. It's a crisis that was caused, yes, by clerical child sex abuse, by episcopal mismanagement. What was at the heart of that mismanagement? Secrecy, lack of communication, fear of communicating, determination not to communicate. I see all of those things at work in the Synod of Bishops. I see the failure to open the doors, to put it all online, to allow us to see the great spectrum of discussion and debate. I see in that fear. And worse than that, I see a distrust of the people of God and an even worse distrust of the Holy Spirit. So my view of it is that it's unhealthy, not just unhelpful, but actually unhealthy.
Yeah. I can get out of that question easily by saying ditto. Having said ditto, the fact of the matter is that Mary is being more polite than I am. I'm sure there is no doubt that there's fear there, and that somehow or other they are protecting themselves from the big bad wolf, you. But at the same time, that secrecy is control. I'd love to say that I think they're afraid that if they answer and they don't do it with the kind of poetic flavor as the bishop next to them, that they'll feel shortchanged or embarrassed. I don't believe that's true at all. I think this is a control move. I think it means that as long as I can keep you all quiet, that we can keep this thing buttoned up, you cannot stand to deal with it. You will not be able to say with certainty anything that you hear that you know. I can, at the same time, realize that we may need 7 to 10 days, us, them, to talk their way through what do you mean by that word? When did that happen? What does that imply? What will come out of that? They need the right to learn from one another. They need the right to prepare their own soul for this new growth. But that does not give them, in my opinion, the right to hide from you, from the church, from this parallel synod, the concerns that are legitimately theirs, but must be said to all of us. This is a synodal church, and a synodal church is one that must listen. And that listening has to start with them. So it is time for us to question both the secrecy and the silence, because neither one of them are mentally healthy arguments to maintain a suppressed church.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to 2 questions in the room. So the lady at the back first. Do we have a roving mic or? Oh, can you shout? All right, I will. Thank you, Colleen. So Colleen from America Magazine.
Please
I'm repeating it now. Thank you, Colleen. So her question to you both is, at the front of this brochure that we have here, we position Spirit Unbounded as in support of Pope Francis. And yet, from Colleen being here at the conference, she has heard many things that could be presumed to be in opposition to Pope Francis. So, what do you say about that? That's your question, Colleen? Okay.
So if that one is Pope Francis's synod, why is it important to have this one? And to what extent is this is in support of Pope Francis?
Okay, Colleen, 3rd time lucky. Do it again, please.
All right, my question is, Spirit Unbounded is defined as, okay, Lord, as in support of Pope Francis. Pope Francis's synod is happening across the street. This synod seems to understand itself as being a very different event from that one, even an event defined in opposition to that one. And so I wonder why choose to define this one as in support of Pope Francis. What does that mean?
I'm very happy to answer that. If you remember, when Pope Francis came into office in March of 2013, he introduced the idea of synodality. It was completely new. That is an expression you will not find anywhere defined. Vatican II, Code of Canon Law, completely new. In fact, the International Theological Commission said they didn't really know what it meant. So, but what he said was he did want to see synodality develop. And he encouraged groups, and in particular dioceses, to consider, and episcopal conferences, to consider initiating
synodal journeys in their own jurisdiction. And I see this as part of that, a response to Francis's call for synodality. Synodality and synod, while a synod of its own nature may be an event, time and time again it has been pointed out that in fact what we're engaged in is a process, a journey, not necessarily with a series of destinations, but a journey that begins to build up communio, companionship, consensus. That's what it's about, and that's what we're about. And we do not see, I certainly don't see us being set up here in opposition, but I do see us having a role to ensure that what happens in the silence and secrecy of the Pope's Synod on Synodality, that does not kick cans down the road. And we all know what the cans are now. We've had 2 years of defining, you know, we've drawn them as well as Andy Warhol's bean cans. We know what they are now. We know what it says on the tin. And we want to be sure that that is actually what is being discussed there. And that when we do get out the far end in 2024, that we'll recognize at least that part of the end of the journey. We'll recognise that part of it. For example, in Ireland, in my own country, when the synod is finished in 2024, our bishops have said, we will have a synod. So the process we are engaged in doesn't have really a beginning, middle and end and series of oppositions, but rather parallel strands of thinking. And for me anyway, what's happening in the synod across the way, part of the reason we are here, in a sense, is to keep them honest, to make sure they honour the existing discernment of the people of God that is so strong.
The other thing I think you have to keep in mind, because you're going to hear a lot of that. I don't believe it will be just a little bit. I'm an American, and we have pods of bishops who have been resisting Francis since the first day he walked in. The Holy Roman Catholic Church has a very holy history of undermining its papal elections. Hildegard of Bingen lived under 10 popes. Seriously. So I think that strain will as Mary says, it's going to stay up there unless you yourselves begin to confront it where you hear it. This notion of undermining will only injure us if we allow ourselves to be undermined. So don't.
Thank you both. Over to you, Synodal Times.
Gary O'Sullivan from Synodal Times. Thank you. Yeah, I could shout as well. But Mary, or the panel, Pope Francis he gives it one hand and he takes it with the other, I think. Under his pontificate, we were told that they can't bless sin when they were speaking about gay people and gay blessings. And also, he answers the dubia then and says to the dubia cardinals that actually, I've an openness to blessings. And he didn't repress the Belgians when they started doing it. But so, what are people in this room? I suppose we call reformer people. We're reformers, and we want to see reform in the church. But is Pope Francis the great reformer that we kind of hope he is? But then he doesn't seem to be he contradicts himself. He's a paradox. Would you agree?
We dubbed him in our house Flip-Flop Francis, because that's been our experience of him. Who am I to judge? Actually, that was great and hopeful, and a lot of people took comfort from it until we realized he wasn't prepared to sit behind the desk and change the judgment that only he as Pope can change. We've seen quite a number of instances of that, where he has been essentially caught out by a tendency to want to be the populist who is loved. I think in particular of an event where he was coming back from, an event in South America, where a young woman had told him that she had an abortion and she was desperately worried about the salvific fate of her child. which is wonderful to hear in some ways because we never talk about salvation nowadays, do we? So he said to her, "Oh, don't worry, your child is in heaven." Now, her little baby was aborted, and obviously the fetus was not baptized. What he told her was what she, I'm sure, wanted to hear, and coming from a pope, it surely was important. It was also not what the church teaches. The church actually teaches it does not know what the salvific fate is of the millions and millions and millions of babies who die by natural miscarriage, by abortion, by stillbirth, and are unbaptized. Because they're unbaptized, they still have, according to our great Aquinas, they still have original sin. And people who die in a state of original sin go to one of two places. They go to heaven or hell. And so what our International Theological Commission came up with only a few years ago was, well, that's a very hard message for parents to hear. It's a ridiculous message, actually, but for a church that's supposed to talk about a loving God. So what they say there is, actually, we don't know, but we do hope that God's mercy kicks in. And that if God's mercy kicks in, we hope then that the child will have a good salvific outcome. I mean, it's a load of, when you think of the investment they make in civil rules and laws in relation to abortion, and they can't deal with this, which is about salvation. And Pope Francis just wanted to be the populist. He could change it tomorrow. He's the man who could change the teaching that would give all those parents, give all those babies that everybody, all the hierarchy fights so strongly for their right to life, but won't fight for their right to salvation, will not fight for their right after death to salvation. So, Francis he's an enigma. He's not strategic. He's wild, messy. And somehow in the messiness of all this, I see the hand of the Holy Spirit at work, because it's created, like it or not, he has created space that we have been yearning for, dying for, trying to create, couldn't create, but he has somehow helped us to find it. So in that respect, I'm so glad of him, glad that we have him, but honestly, he drives me mad.
He is what Mary recognizes as driving us mad is true, but it is also a very common element of a common society at a very uncommon time. I have always seen, for instance, when the gay community began to present itself, the church was not at all hesitant about condemning them to hell. If you wanted clarity, you did get it. There's no doubt about that. So when Francis came in, I listened to him for a long time, and I decided again that this guy is a spiritual tease, and there is a kind of Hollywood dimension to the way he presents an idea. I think that a lot of what he did was kind of testing the waters. It was possibilities at bay. And then you get not all the possibility, and then you get, but we do have to look at that. And then you get up the next day and somebody says, well, some of it isn't good, but the rest of it could be good. It is maddening, but it is also not destructive. It doesn't end what it started. And it says to you, we have to go through all these things. We have to listen to a lot of things. And we're going to be the people who have to demand the listening. It's we who want to get into this conversation, and we want that conversation brought to us with clarity. But it's going to take a lot of theological changing. I mean, the words have to go, the criteria has to go, we're not changing just the structures of the church. We are changing its rhetoric. We are changing its understanding. And it's not going to be easy for any of us. If you think half your family loves Donald and the other half doesn't, you're prepared for the next 10 years of the Roman Catholic Church.
Thank you. Okay, we have time for just one more question. We've got 3 minutes. So another question from Elisabetta, and then I'll go from the question that just came in. So Elisabetta, I've been struck that for the most part, the participants in Spirit Unbounded, at least those who came to Rome, I don't know about all over who's participating, are Anglo-Saxon or German. Aren't Germans Anglo? No, they're not. Anglo-Saxon or German. Do you think that the drive for reform is stronger in these countries?
Oh, right. All I do know is there has been a theory that that the reform movement within the church is really driven from within the Western church. And that certainly looked the case because the most visible damage to the church is evident in the Western church. I don't need to rehearse all the things that are evident. But, and so actually, even a few months ago, I might have thought that, that probably is largely true, accepted, of course, that it is the West leading the way. But then the results started to come in from all the Episcopal conferences, which had engaged in the synodal process. And here I'm talking about the Synod of Bishops process initiated by Pope Francis. And the reports started to come in, and the synthesized reports of the national syntheses, the continental phase, and then those that went to Rome. And what was remarkable to me was the consensus. Right around the 5 continents, wherever 2 or more are gathered, we're all given out about the same things. And we're all concerned about the same things and feeling the same determination that this is our opportunity now to have that voice heard. So actually my view on this has been changed for the better in many ways. I've been so excited. I was very taken by something that Sister Pat Murray, for whom incidentally I have the highest respect. Sister Pat is one of the women who was chosen to be on the inside of the Synod. But she spoke in Dublin a few months ago and was talking about the fact that Pope Francis had asked her to conduct kind of what I might call mini synods among the religious orders. And that would be worldwide, because hers is a worldwide role. She's based here in Rome. And she said what stunned her, and we're talking about religious orders now, what stunned her was, again, the consensus from all around the world, issues to do with inclusion of women, ordination of women, LGBTIQ inclusion. There was no difference between what was coming from the religious than there was coming from the laity. And I just feel so vindicated by that. This is not a Western white church phenomenon. This is not just a bunch of women, getting anxious about being excluded. This is something absolutely, utterly different. This is people of faith demanding equality, because equality is just, and because we think our church, as experienced hierarchically, is not just. And we want it to be. We want it to be. And that's why we are here.
There's nothing that I can see or have experienced that can be added to that. I simply want to make the point that as we go into this, we have to listen clearly for the Holy Spirit. Now, when you have a global response in 5 arenas and all of the topics are the same, you'll have to talk to me long and hard to tell me that the Holy Spirit is not with us in this. God bless you all.
Very good.